Well, the Pacific solution or the Pacific problem as conditions on Nauru come under fire. A recent surge of asylum seeker arrivals has forced a change in the government's tactics. Detention facilities in Australia will now be reactivated and expanded, and new visa arrangements will be put in place, though they've been condemned as temporary protection visas by another name. In a moment, we'll talk to psychologist Amanda Gordon, who's set to give her advice on the treatment of asylum seekers to the government later this week. But first, here's Danny Isdale.
The concerns that we have in talking to the people on Nauru are particularly the concerns around their mental health, the fact that some of them have shown us signs where they've scarred themselves through self-harm. We've obviously got a long-term hunger striker there. They showed us where one man tried to commit suicide. Even when they're found to be genuine refugees, Australia's not prepared to say when they'll be able to accept them permanently.
Of all the difficult conditions asylum seekers face on Nauru, the worst, says Amnesty International, is the uncertainty.
For a young child to be detained potentially for 5 years on an island where they don't know what their future is that seems unreasonably cruel in my view.
Could it be 5 years? Yes, it could.
The opposition offers those in limbo little comfort.
People who come illegally to this country can't expect to be staying at a 4-star or 5-star hotel.
A lack of luxury isn't the government's most pressing problem.
Recent high arrival rates have placed pressure on our detention network.
387 asylum seekers are now on Nauru, and 19 more have just arrived on Manus Island. They're swamped by the more than 7,000 new arrivals since the government reactivated the Pacific solution in August.
If you can't control our borders, you can't run the country.
Detention facilities are now being expanded in Victoria and reopened in Tasmania. And now refugees coming into the community will do so on bridging visas, meaning they'll be unable to work.
Can the Minister confirm that these are indeed temporary protection visas, and why won't the government just call them for what they are?
What they are is a toughening up of the government's asylum seeker policies in an increasingly desperate bid to stop the boats.
The overriding moral and humanitarian obligation on the Australian government is to stop people drowning at sea.
Well, clinical psychologist and former government advisor Amanda Gordon joins me now. Amanda, thank you for your time. You've been involved in a study with the Australian Psychological Society looking at the impact on detainees' health in these detention centres. What has that study found?
Well, there have been many studies done over many years, and they're all entirely consistent. The first thing we know is that there is no circumstance in which it's safe for children to be detained. Whether it's only for a couple of days or whether it's weeks or months, there is no circumstance in which children are not damaged. We also know from research that was even commissioned by the government at the advice of our expert group that there is a time frame beyond which people can no longer cope, and even the most resilient person who has not suffered a trauma before except for the terrible journey to arrive here is going to start suffering mental health problems after 12 months, even the most resilient. So when you think about most of the people having come here through very traumatic circumstances, then we know that they are vulnerable much, much earlier than that.
And we know as well that they could be facing a wait of a lot longer than 12 months. Amanda, do you accept the veracity of the claims made by Amnesty today about overcrowding? They're talking about potentially 14 people to a tent in temperatures of upwards of 40 degrees, enough, they say, in some cases to even trigger suicide.
Well, there's no reason to believe that they would be lying. If there are 14 people in a tent, it feels like too many. I don't like to share a room with, one person I don't know well for any extended period of time, and to think that there could be 14 people who don't know each other, who might be from different language groups, who might in fact have been in conflict in their country of origin and just crammed in with no personal space and in the heat, is just a situation that is prone to disaster. It's hard to believe it will be anything else. There have been psychological studies over many years that have shown the risks of overcrowding, and when people aren't even choosing to be together with those people, it will be even harder.
On Friday, you'll be meeting with legislators to discuss the findings of this study, and you'll be asking also for an independent committee to be set up to monitor these things. Why do we need that committee?
We're very concerned that a group of expert medical people, health experts, are able to monitor what's going on. We don't want it to be that the people who set up these offshore processing centres are the ones who are saying, yes, we're doing a good enough job, everything's fine. We want people who have expertise in health and in mental health in particular to be able to oversee and to have the ear of people who can make a difference.
But I want to ask, Amanda, we do have the, obviously you've got the Red Cross, you've got Amnesty, you've got those organisations keeping a close eye. Do the revelations today about the overcrowding not suggest that what we've got in place already is working?
Well, you see, they will be very good at being able to note humanitarian issues, and they'll be able to talk about what's important from the UN, and the Human Rights Commission and what they say is good enough or not. But you see, we know that there are risk factors associated with the health and mental health of people in detention. We understand those risk factors, and if we can have expert advice inputting into things, we can mitigate against risk. We can make sure things are safe for people who are in detention and reduce the risk of suicide and self-harm.
Some big challenges ahead, that's for
There really
sure.
are.
Amanda Gordon, thank you so much for joining us tonight
Thank you.
and for your insight.